please, not too heavy. Saw Joel Newby win the Democratic primary, so he'll be going up against Savers this year. Whatever kind of election winds up playing out, it could be a good thing, a bad thing, a preposterous thing. Totally could be gerrymandering by listening vote by mail.
23% turnout. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. 23% turnout. We're gonna talk about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is great. It's a great way to kind of jump into everything because, we'll be able to hit a bunch of different levels. So the plan is to go through a few different phases of things. Talk about teaching, talk about this, talk about that. All right, everybody. Yeah, so we're kind of addressing this general vicinity over here. I went out of my way to put all my coolest stuff up behind me.
Okay.
So obviously I'm trying to impress everyone. Hey everybody, welcome to today's show. I haven't decided what to call it yet, but here we are. And I'm Jordan, and as usual, that's Tim back there. Hey! Hey. And this today is our guest, Angie Rader. And she is department facilitator and a teacher of broadly what we call social studies, but specifically AP and US government at Hilliard High School. Angie, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we've been very professional in our opening. Let's be a little less professional. I was once upon a time going to be a teacher.
All right.
For whatever reason, I tripped down the stairs, broke a few bones, and found myself as a donut shop owner. And, donut slinger many, many decades later now. But at one point in time, I stood in front of classrooms here in Hilliard, at Hilliard Bradley High School, and, did the teaching thing. And I just wanted to know, was there anything we wanted to add to your bio? Is there anything we need to talk about to tell us what brought you to Hilliard all these years?
Funny story. I was a college student, senior in college. My husband was graduated a year ahead of me, and when he graduated, had a job, and they transferred him to Georgia, specifically Aiken, Georgia. And I said, I'm not going there. So before our wedding, he quit and started interviewing and got a job here in Hilliard. I was finishing student teaching, and he said, how would you like to move to Hilliard, Ohio? And
it wasn't Aiken, Georgia.
No, it wasn't Aiken, Georgia. I'd never heard of Hilliard, Ohio, and here we are, he's been here 28, and then I followed after I graduated.
Right,
so,
and raised all your kids here.
Yeah. Kyle's 24, Davidson graduate. He lives in Peoria, Illinois, works for Caterpillar, graduated from Ohio State. And Kelsey, she graduated from Davidson as well. She's actually going to be a junior now, effectively, last Friday.
As things
crazy.
Just pass through whatever we're calling the school year these days.
Chemical engineering major at OU. So,
wow.
Yeah, so
Fantastic.
Here we are. Yeah, so a long time.
That's, as we get into more and more of what this thing is going to be about long term, the rapid progression of Hilliard through the phases of essentially a small town with one string of school buildings to now a burgeoning full-fledged suburb with vast housing and all these different things being added at all times, with 3 high schools, multiple inlets through all the different age levels for education, public education here in Hilliard. So tracing that evolution of the city itself is going to be a big part of all the conversations and things that we have. So I think it's interesting. You mentioned your daughter's at OU right now, and I didn't know, just as preface to all this, we're kind of in unprecedented times in our lifetime, and there's been some news recently about at OU specifically some layoffs, some things.
140 layoffs,
yeah. Heretofore, and from Great Depression essentially, unprecedented kind of direct job loss. Call it furlough, call it reductions, call it whatever you like. There are people that are going through, a lack of work.
Sure.
And it's impacting all levels now, and it's even reaching higher education, academia.
Sure.
You know, one of those rarefied places that once you get to a certain status, you kind of secure a profession, a place to, you know, pass along your knowledge, to construct, you know, the future of the society through the kids that you see and teach, you know, to have all that kind of jumbled. What's your take on how that's kind of playing out in education?
I've heard from several students, my niece, my husband's niece, and actually some people here in Hilliard, that if school is online, college is online, they'd rather just stay home and go to Columbus State and do the Columbus State online classes than go to university.
Right.
So if you don't have students to fill those seats in college, yeah, unfortunately, you know, what are you going to do? And if people make those decisions based on income they can't afford to pay $30,000, well, you'd be paying for tuition, not room and board, but the 15 grand to do a degree or start a degree at Ohio State or Cincinnati or OU or wherever, they'd rather do the online at Columbus State.
Have a good day. I think that's really insightful. I think there's kind of a very up in the air situation now where, you know, throughout history, people have realized that technological advancement has changed reality.
Sure.
And now that people are seeing this kind of connectivity, the possibilities,
right.
And I say that cautiously because accreditation wise, in-person attendance tells you something.
Sure.
You know, face-to-face learning, rapport, grading, relationship building, all that tells you something about the quality of the person that's kind of ineffable,
right.
Via this online reproduction of education.
Right. There's nothing that's ever going to replace that one-to-one relationship the teacher has with their class. You know, and I miss that. We are 6 weeks in, and I'm missing about 2 weeks in. It's like, okay, you know, everybody loves a snow day. You know, I'm sorry, every teacher loves a snow day.
Right.
You know, okay, give me
the unexpected joy of unexpectedness.
But this is heartbreaking. This is what we do. You know, like 2 weeks in, I'm like, I'm sick of this. I want to go see my kids. I want to go see my kids. You know, and they're my kids. I teach seniors mostly, and I've got some juniors in there, but yeah, I want to see them. I want to be there. I want to teach them, especially, you know, even the situation where we're dealing with civil rights and civil liberties. You know, your rights to get out, to, you know, have your business, to do stuff, versus, you know, the Constitution. What's in your rights versus everybody else's safety.
Practical application of these
practical
things.
application stuff. I want to be there. I want to talk about that stuff
Right.
with my kids.
Right.
You know, that's what we do.
Right.
Seeing it unfold, and I wasn't able to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, I can assign current events, but the discussions that we have in class, just not from me telling them, but from what other insightful people are saying in my class. It's those things that we're deliberating.
And insightful people that have currency, people that have, you know, everybody respects the role of the teacher.
Sure.
In the relationship.
Sure.
But the other thing that people respect is when Jeff or Tammy or Priscilla or whoever is in the class that's a peer sees things a certain way.
Sure.
You know, building that kind of peer consensus
Sure.
via guided discussion is one of the hallmarks of education. It harkens back to the deepest foundations of education, Socratic method, the dialoguing that goes on between student and teacher that delivers a kind of learning that makes real education possible.
Right.
And we say that in a very specific way. I think that given what we're going through right now, we're kind of living in a situation that is providing a simulation of education.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go on. And I think it's important to kind of forecast what things might be in the future. Sure. And how things might need to be structured. But that's, again, we'll get to that.
Okay.
But I think you really hit on something with that idea that there are things that we're missing in minute-to-minute interaction that can't be replaced by kids doing lessons somewhere.
Right.
And I think the technology is changing the situation so rapidly and changing the possibilities, it's all up in the air.
Mhm.
We don't know how somebody who's learned in this way will fare in the world versus somebody that's
Right.
learned in the more traditional proven
Right.
methods.
Mhm.
So we're kind of in the middle of a vast educational experiment,
Mhm.
just like we always are.
Right, yeah.
But preferably it's at a more measured pace and something that we can control by planning policy, unified approaches, things that we can rely on as things that have been developed by professionals.
Absolutely.
So, so moving into things, let's get into the direct questions. I
Okay.
think that um, it'll be great to kind of go through different phases and aspects of education, community, and just personal relationships.
Mhm.
But let's get started locally.
Okay.
And we've talked a little bit about this already, but you're an advisor to seniors. I saw that in some of your online stuff. I
Yep.
think in an
I'm
email
senior
you
class
sent to
advisor.
me,
Yep.
senior class
Yep,
advisor.
I am.
And I see, walking to work as I do, I see people with their senior class signs out and
Yep.
things like that. And how are the seniors doing with all this? I know you teach a lot of upper class people
Right.
because you're in AP and US government, which are upper class
Right.
requirements
Yep.
and courses. So
They're sad. I
yeah,
expect that. I'm sad for it.
yeah,
This is, regardless today where we are, we know that generally speaking, high school education isn't the end of
Right.
most of our educations. You don't have to go to college, but you need a skill, you need a trade. And so, but still, high school graduation is still a big deal. It's
Yeah.
a big deal.
Yeah.
It's the entry into adulthood. You know?
Finish of a phase.
Yeah, and it's a celebration for families. One more reason to get together, all of that. So
As there are less and less of those.
yeah, and there aren't, and for so many of our EL population here in Hilliard, um, these are the first kids to graduate high school. And some other students that aren't in our minority population, this is the first child in some cases to graduate high school. For whatever life brought, the parents or whatever. So it is a big deal.
Yeah.
You hear these still, we're going through the air horns, the shot, and the clapping, just the excitement from families of a child graduating from high school. So it's a big deal. And to not be able to have that celebration is, that in of itself is a tragedy. But there's other things, like there's just traditions that we do at school. The end of the year.
Dances.
Yeah, the end of prom. Yeah, prom and things that we do in class that I'm gonna do online. I'm gonna video and send to them. Stuff that we do together, to culminate everything that we've learned and bring it to celebrate the end that you've done this. You've made it to the end. That's just not gonna happen. So.
Yeah.
It's there's no other word. There's no magical word. Just sad.
Yeah. As somebody who's done the same kind of routine, every day for a lot of years, it's nice to have markers that you can celebrate with your friends,
Sure.
honestly, and to think about those end of the year assemblies where you hear a speaker or you sit with your friends and you
Right.
recognize each other's achievements, or you go through a recognition of your teachers, or the processes you've
Mhm.
gone through. You look back on each other's shared history. It's all important stuff, informative in a lot of ways, and baseline experiences like sports, like academics, all those things. It all adds up to a person ready for the world. As we're unsure of what this kind of form of education is delivering to people, and given society's inequalities, what level of penetration even this level of education is getting throughout the spectrum of incomes and accessibilities.
Right.
We don't know how these kids are going to be prepared to meet the future, and that's Hilliard Schools' planning mission. It's their whole driving ambition is to ready for tomorrow. I'm a very happy taxpayer here in Hilliard because I think that the schools get the lion's share of the taxes, as they should, as number one, the city and basically county's largest employer. And then also, I think that it's important to have a focus to the community.
Right.
And with a school system that's as forward as Hilliard's is, that's a ready focus for the community. And I always think focusing on youth, focusing on
Sure.
public access and
Right.
public participation, that's a healthy community drive.
Right.
And I think that's important to the overall development of a community. So if a student gets a good grade in social studies, AP government, US government, what are they prepared to do with that knowledge that you've given them, like day one into the world? Welcome to that post-graduation phase you were just talking about.
Number one would be, and we were able to get through that mostly, be an informed voter. How to get that information, how to get next year, definitely, how to get an absentee ballot, how to find voter information, how to decide, looking at the issues. And there's obviously a state curriculum. I mean, we have to cover, there's 34 items that we have to cover in state curriculum. But beyond that, one of the big things for me is I think I had a handful of students that weren't old enough to register to vote, because in the primary, even 17, if you're going to be 18 in the state of Ohio by November, whatever the date of election is, you can register to vote and vote in the primary. Can't vote on monetary issues, so they couldn't have voted on the C-State, the levy. They couldn't have voted on the levy this time for C-State, but everything else they could vote on if they were ready to declare the party, because we have to,
Closed
even though, well, you have an open primary, but you have to declare a party. And we went through all of that, and why. And there were some kids that, they're just not ready yet. They don't know. And that's okay. And I tell them, that's fine. But if you're ready to declare and you want to vote, go vote. So they're going to be able to do that. They're going to be able to find information. I mean, without a simple where to look for information, we go through specifically, at the national level, at the state level, at the local level, we introduce them to all of that stuff. How do you find bills? How do you find your representative, your senator, your state, local? And then we look at the city of, we don't spend a ton of time on that because it's a U.S. government class, but we do introduce them and talk about that. I had Councilman Les Carrier come in and talk. He's good. A lot of kids, they know him. And, talk about local issues. We talk about that through current events. There's one person in my class presents a current event every day, alphabetical, and we do a national article, we do a state or local, they pick. We do something we're talking about in class, we do a political cartoon, and they stand up and they explain it, give their opinion on each, and we have dialogue.
Yeah.
And so they're learning all of that. So issues and how to find information and what citizenship looks like.
That's great. That's great. I think the important thing also to recognize with that kind of system and structure is with that regular recurring presentation of information,
right,
there's recurring opportunity to say good source, bad source, good source, bad source,
right,
reasons why. Critical thinking applications,
well,
the study of government, history, social studies
right,
broadly is all about that.
And we lay off Fox News and MSNBC. So no too far right, no too far left. AP, use the AP, Associated Press, use Reuters, use that for information, get the facts, which again aren't always accurate,
right.
But decipher it, make your own opinion.
Build an understanding through
Absolutely.
supplementary reading
Absolutely.
that favors one thing or the other,
Right.
but recognize the
Sure.
bias present
Sure.
in the material.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think one thing that people still don't kind of get about why I think a lot of these subjects are so important is that the study of history is just analysis, recurring regular analysis rigorously applied via certain principles, deliver reliable results. And
Sure.
they can say this delivered this result or this
Right.
delivered that result. Where there's so much uncertainty right now,
right.
that kind of thinking, that kind of process generated thinking is important. And leads to a little bit of another follow-up question. I'm a big believer in the term civics. And, whatever relationship the subject of social studies, government bears to the term civics, which is an examination of rights and responsibilities.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that, about how the curriculum has evolved, what's emphasized and what's less emphasized, more emphasized.
AP Government last year, for the first time, they came up with a civic engagement project. And for that, I opted to do the AP Government students, they could attend a school board meeting, they could attend a city council meeting or one of the committee meetings, and then make sure that I had them grab an agenda and then have somebody sign that was there. It's been a while now, but the civics, we used to have the community service hours. We don't have that anymore. But embedded in our class, doing that. So we have the government, there isn't a required, in U.S. government, there's not a required number of hours that we do for civic engagement. But there are many other clubs like NHS and other opportunities around the school that do have kids get involved and do some, not necessarily something with government related, but other things where they're civically engaged.
I think there's a sense of civics, as I see it, is that understanding of this is a malleable system.
Mm-hmm.
This is a thing that can and should be evaluated and changed.
Sure.
And you, kid, person, young individual, and me, and her, and Tim, are change agents. And how we organize that change is civics. It's via a shared understanding of what we prioritize.
Right.
And I think so often that, kids now are coached and driven to emerge from whatever education they pursue as job ready, market ready.
Right.
What I hope is eventually understood by everybody I come in contact with and everybody I work with is that, market ready means world ready.
Right.
And world ready means ready to, consolidate your resources, work with other people, find cooperative arrangements that can deliver, good results for everybody. How do you think somebody walking out of a social studies or civics classroom education feels about that kind of community engagement, that kind of rapport building, that type of enterprise, I guess I should say?
I think they have to understand, we live in a global economy. We spend a lot of time talking about that and being able to be flexible and learning and engaging in the speed at which you do things, and the marketability, reaching out to everybody and understanding the context of what a true global economy means. I think that's been probably in the last 10 years, how much that truly has changed me, a lot. And their understanding of that, I think, is a big impact that we try to press upon them.
Yeah. I think getting people ready for the reality of a world that has a domestic population, just in this country, of 300 million plus people. Who knows what the census is going to turn out this year, given how disjointed and discombobulated everything is.
Right.
It's one of those things that you have to have a radical expansion of your ability to think broadly. Whether or not you become a big fish in a small pond or a important cog in a larger process or machine of people and companies and cooperatives, whatever you want to find your way into, you have to realize that it can potentially be a global market.
Sure.
That said, how do you kind of respond to the idea that civics and social studies and the study of history broadly is kind of, and should be, in my view, a level of moral education?
Always learn from the past. I mean, we said that. That's one of the big reasons, obviously. The requirement that every student pass U.S. history and government obviously came out of a movement for patriotism and all of that. But it's definitely an experience where you have to learn from the past. Look, this didn't work. And 20 years later, we're looking back and like, oh, we probably shouldn't have done that, or maybe even not that long. We look and we evolve from our mistakes, hopefully, and then we don't do those again. This worked or that worked, and looking at trends. We also look at all the data, going back in opinion polls, public opinion polls. We look at that kind of information to kind of draw what could we have done better.
Right.
So moving forward.
Given that kind of examination and trying to understand where we've left, right, center, strayed, out of whack with the broad concerns of, the American population and the world good at large is an important part of any kind of historical analysis. What do you think is driving the focus of education right now? Because obviously there are forces present
Sure.
that are kind of shaping education. There was recently a study published by the Rand Corporation that was very, kind of negatively assessing the Gates initiatives Gates Foundation's,
Right.
Directing different merit pay, I think it was mostly, instructional models, things of that nature, and just basically saying, no, there's no gain here. How do you feel public education policy is being shaped by all these different forces? Are the right people driving public education right now?
At the national level, no. No.
Sure.
No.
The DeVos family,
Yeah,
charter royalty,
yeah,
essentially.
She's never,
Pure
she
privatization
has no
models.
idea what we do in public education and the masses that we serve and what we do every day. No, absolutely not. Locally, there are things that we're doing. Obviously, with the technological impact and every student having an iPad at the secondary level, that's why we were able to do what we've done. To make that happen so quickly. It was you saw it coming. You saw what was coming, like with the closure of schools. We were getting there, and we were getting there. And I'm sitting in principal's office, and I said, I don't think we're going to be here next week. He said, I don't think so either. And it was coming, and it was coming, and it's like, wow, And I turned around and I took a picture of my classroom just in case.
Yeah, last time it might ever be set up like that.
Yeah, I took my plants home, and I took everything off my desk, and took a few boxes of books that I thought I might need, and I thought there's a good chance we're not coming back. And things were starting to level off. I'm like, okay, we'll get to come back. But right now, I think the push is, where are we going to be? Where are we going to be next year? What are we going to do?
Right.
And how are we going to give students the best education? Well, safety. I think safety's always going to be first, and then education. So we got to keep them safe, and we've got to give them the academic that they need to have to be successful.
The best of what you can give them, given the limitations.
Right.
I think, when you had that moment sitting in that office and you kind of turned and looked and you said, well, this is the net that we've built.
Right.
The net of everybody having this iPad allows us to, act in a way to keep everyone as safe as possible and to test the limits and to find, whether or not we can deliver.
Right. Now, having said that, because air testing the government air test was scheduled for April 14th or 15th. And
they started jackhammering today.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was 90% through with my content.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having a real hard time imagining teaching the beginning of the year, because the foundations of what we do and understanding the constitutional principles that we hammer out in the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a real hard time imagining how successful I'm going to be being able to deliver that if we go completely online.
Mm.
And again, this is I'm wrapping up 27 years in education, so I'm like a dinosaur. I'm a dinosaur, but yet, we keep moving, we keep doing all of this.
But I don't think the issue is the feeling that there's a technological limit.
No.
I think the thing that you quantified earlier by saying, the rapport, the discussions, the environment.
Absolutely.
That moment of a student saying, I am not afraid to ask this question, and I am not afraid to measure my knowledge in this environment. I think that's kind of irreplaceable, and I think that's kind of what you touched on throughout.
Yeah. Definitely.
I appreciate that. That old saying, nothing new under the sun, to somebody who's been teaching for 27 years. But here we are, and it absolutely is. You touched a little bit on national policy direction. I know state policy is always a hot button and in flux.
Testing, yeah.
And testing, relative to criteria plus funding models,
Right.
all those things.
I'm worried about my juniors that I have in government. So they wiped out the state testing. So suddenly, if the powers that be at the State House next year decide that, let's just say hypothetically we do go back, okay? I'm worried about them bringing testing back and saying, okay, this is my fear for them. They were, and we've provided a great instruction. There's some great stuff out there, and what they did, and I will say, most of my kids, not even most, the majority of my kids did the assignments that I asked. They did them pretty well, and I'm worried about all this going back to normal and the testing coming back next year. So I'm worried.
Kind of a snapback kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of like, okay, we're back at it. Let's just go, and then these kids will test. I'm really worried that will happen.
Then that would, because then that becomes a football to be held when it comes to matters of funding, when it comes to matters of apportionment of resources and everything else,
And
because it shows,
your report card. Yeah, and it's also, if we go back to normal, that means teacher evaluations. That's the same thing, it's coming from that.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads me a little bit to ask you about the role of unions. I think that people have opinions about unions in the country, unionization.
Sure.
I tend to feel very strongly that unionization is one of the few ways that you can create real solidarity, real bonds between people that share class interests and create a force for negotiation beyond individuals.
Sure.
And I think that, anybody who's been around understands that you never want to be alone against a powerful structure, a powerful individual, or a powerful entity.
Sure.
So it only follows that unions are important. What role, education unions play now, teachers unions play now? Tell me a little bit about the overall union background. There are two main unions in the United States nationally, right?
NEA and AFT, yes.
American Federation of Teachers and National Education
Association.
Okay.
And we are Hilliard. We are part of the National Education Association. So,
okay.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many we have or how many we don't have, but I think most people belong to HEA. And I've been watching, I know that the leadership of HEA, they're involved in the discussion with Dr. Marshausen of what is coming next year, what next year is going to look like. But again, it's the unknown. How many people are worried? Am I going to be placed online? And will I ever get to come back? If we ever get to come back, will I ever get to come back to the job that I left? That's been it's been a huge question over and over again that I'm seeing in our discussions, emails, and things going back. Because, if you're a classroom teacher, if you've been doing it for a long time, that's part of who you are.
No, absolutely.
And if you're voluntold that you are going to be an online teacher for whatever reason, while the unknown, obviously, being afraid of that, but what is all of that, but what's a day going to look like for us? We're told right now that it could possibly be A and B. Like, we'll have some kids coming on A day, and then some kids coming like maybe Monday, Wednesday, maybe some coming or Tuesday, Thursday. But again, it's a hybrid. We're calling it a hybrid and doing some online.
To have a blend of online learning potentially, but also a few days in the building, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. There's really no telling what it will look like, until we see how the next several months go, whether vaccines become a reality, antibodies and all that other stuff.
Sure.
Whereas in education, I'm all for less testing, generally speaking, or less rigorously applied testing with ridiculous mandates, and more classroom testing of discussion, understanding, principle, and, full usage of terms, all that kind of stuff. I think that's all part of education. I think that, what we're suffering from now is a lack of testing, a lack of overall cohesion, a lack of a plan that says, we're going to pursue a method where isolation, contact tracing, all these things that can be done, should be done, could be done to expedite people's understanding, lessen people's anxiety about this whole thing.
Right.
Because as it's been pointed out by people, most Americans don't have $400 to put together in a crisis, and that was 4 weeks ago. That's fine to be frustrated about not being able to get back in the fight, but simultaneously, if we had had a more prepared overall system,
Right.
we could have eased our way back into this fight and caused people a lot less stress and anxiety on the system. So, up against all that, we have to put people out into our local community from our schools, to address all this stuff. And I saw that you and I both were applicants to serve on commissions. I don't know if you were mostly doing that for your government students that were there.
No, I wasn't. I've lived here for a long time, almost 30 years in Hilliard, and obviously was involved in one other political fight before that as well. But I was also involved in the charter review. I was part of that committee. I did that. I was encouraged to do that, just to watch the democratic process and how that happened. But this one, I actually wanted to do. It was one that I've always, because they were pretty powerful. And I would, just the development and how things have been allowed to progress. I wanted to be a part of that. So, but that didn't work out. But that's okay. Try again.
Absolutely. And I think just recently there was some more information that came out and was made public about what the actual Hilliard Development Corporation is and is supposed to do and is organized to do. And I think a lot of that comes about because of people like you, people like myself, people that have run for office, people that are kind of agitating to look behind the curtains of what happens in one of these burgeoning suburbs. I mean, the truth of it is, the budget looks one way, the portrayal of reality looks another way, and the potential has just been growing and growing. But I feel like, the city by and large has been tripping up the stairs of growth this whole time.
Right.
So, given the new reality that we're under, the new form of city government, the new city manager, I'm interested to see, as I know you are, whether or not substantive change, or maybe the mechanism for substantive change, can be created. What do you think the role of Hilliard teaching, Hilliard school system is in creating substantive change about how the city, the school as the major employer, and as the major, driver of culture for the whole city's youth, how do you think they need to interface better? I feel like there's a lack of connectivity between the school, the city, the county. It's all kind of jumbled right now.
Right. And when I think Hilliard, I think schools. I think Hilliard City Schools. That's it.
Absolutely.
That is it. That's the culture. That is it. Hilliard City Schools is Hilliard. It drives Hilliard. That is, and of course I'm from a small town in Southeast Ohio, and that wasn't the case when I grew up. So, and I think that's gotten even more evident as the years have gone on. They definitely need to have a working relationship. That's always not been the case, but they need to do that. We need to consider that it's what we talked about, the economy. I mean, so much of it is impacted. Yes, we need to have diversified housing, but we need to do it in a way when we can't have diversified housing. We have tons of apartments that are going to draw kids coming into one elementary school. We're going to have overcrowdedness. And you want to have community. You want to have a community in your school. That's good. That draws, you talk about that community where you want to have conversation, you want to draw people in. You want to have civic engagement, but you can't do that if it's overcrowded, if you're taking the kids that are in this neighborhood and busing them over to another elementary school because there's no room in one. And we also talk about, business has to be considered. It cannot be, because 75% of our property taxes, they are going to schools. And it is expensive, and I tell my students, your parents made a choice for you to live here to get a great education. They're sacrificing for you to be here to get the education that you're getting. And we discussed that, I pop my property taxes up. I show them, and I pull up Les Wexner's, and I, show mine. And just I say, look, privately, pull up your parents. I take them to the auditor's site. Look at what they're doing. Look at who's getting their money. And I show, if you're living in an apartment building, look at your landlord. Look at what they own and what they're paying. And show them, walk through them. When we talk about federalism, show them that. Yes, there needs to be more. And not only that, but the police and fire, because every time as we continue to grow, we're impacting not only schools, but we're talking police and we're talking fire. All of the services that we provide, let alone, our overcrowded roads and so, but that goes back to another issue that we fought, a few years ago. So, there needs to be a working relationship with them, and I'm optimistic that, especially with Andy's background with the school board, I'm optimistic that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's been a rising tide of concerned people that has slowly built up the necessary power to kind of now find themselves in a position that they can more deliberately direct things.
Absolutely.
And, that's always subject to review. They're called elections. That's always subject to review. They're called open council meetings.
Yeah.
That's always subject to review. That's called write up a thing and go stand in front of people and tell them what you think. And that's how it should be.
Right. The problem is we just have very few people showing up to do that. And going back to the primary that we just had, only a 23% voter turnout.
Right.
Oh, come on.
Yeah,
that's frustrating. That's just really frustrating.
Of course. And I think that's, I think that gets to maybe what's on offer, that gets to the circumstances of this year's election, how things got kind of tossed into the air at the last moment.
Right.
Ohioans, while kept safe from being encouraged to go out and vote in person, which we've seen has led to some signipoll issues in Wisconsin. And I think in Florida as well, there have been, confirmed issues with the poll workers there as well. That saved Ohioans from that burden, but it also kind of showed, even with what the participation rate was in the previous general election, showed what a tenuous grip we have on the reality of claiming to be a representative democracy, that's supported by ongoing elections that are graded as, internationally accredited, all these things that kind of happen as a result of these things being tossed up in the air. So, going forward, would you be in favor of something like universal voter registration at 18? Just boom, there it is. You're in the voter database, and that's that.
Well, you can't do that because it's a violation of some people's religious rights. There are some religions that don't participate, so you can't do that. And there are some people that they don't want to engage. So I throw out when I vote. I'm one of the few teachers that I bring. It's a day. It's a rite of passage in my class. The day we register to vote, I gather them all in. And I mail them in. I double check them make sure that they're right.
Right.
And make sure they're
don't
all
get
done.
Disqualified for something on the outside of the envelope.
Exactly. I check them, make sure they all have the required information on there, and then I mail them in to the Board of Elections for them. And there are some kids that choose not to. I'm not going to force them to vote. And there are some people that their religious affiliation, they don't do that, and that's okay. So although I would never give up my right to vote. Never, ever do that. On the other hand, I can't force someone to do that either, to be engaged. But I always tell them, you're a taxpayer. You're going to be a taxpayer. Maybe not a taxpayer right now, but you're going to be a taxpayer at some point in your life. So have a voice.
I was going to say, think about not being allowed to go to the bathroom twice a year.
Yeah, have a voice.
That's what getting to vote in an election.
And I wonder, all these Facebook politicians that I see every day, I wonder how many of them actually voted on primary day. As a government teacher, I have to bite my tongue, because when we were fighting SB 5, I certainly lost a lot of Facebook friends, years ago.
Unbelievable. To think that cost anybody anything, and to think that how effective that negative messaging was around that. I mean, it's unbelievable
Right.
that they could package something like right to work
Yeah.
as like something that people would fight for, that's something that people would jump out of their
Right.
skin for and lose friends over. It's unbelievable.
And I lost a lot of local friends over my political fight in 2016 here too. So I kind of lay low.
Is that issue 9?
Yeah, I kind of lay low in what I put out because I am, as the kids graduate, they send me Facebook friend requests and I take them because I like to see what they do. I mean, you know, they've got super bright lives, and I want to see what happens to them
Right.
and stay in touch with them.
It's a nourishing cycle to
Right.
see people not immiserated.
Right. So
to see people going through joyous moments,
Right.
it's really great. You
Yeah.
should all try it sometime.
And so, you know, and they still have siblings that, you know, maybe are around, or maybe
Sure.
I'm still teaching or whatever. So I kind of laid back on my political thoughts, and I try not to get into that fighting on Facebook anymore. But you know, there was a time, yeah, I was okay, you know, and so,
Well,
but I'm not into that anymore.
Yeah, I think that what we've seen, you know, with this recent pandemic is that when something that truly affects the whole system,
Sure.
it kind of lays bare how it affects different layers of that system extremely differently.
Right.
And people that might, you know, be the most vociferous, out loud arguing people on Facebook, they have a very secure position. They have a very safe place. They don't have to worry about the safety,
Right.
security of 200 young people every day. They don't have to be in an environment where they might get sick every day. They have things that are organized a certain way by the way society is and it exists now, that provides a layer of, you know, immunity essentially.
Sure.
So I think that, you know, when you're seeing how it affects the whole strata of the whole population, you can only appreciate what public educators do, you know, what people are out here trying to do to make sure that we're all treated equally,
Right.
to ensure that the highest and most idealistic words in our founding documents were hewing more in their direction than away from their direction.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately, you know, somebody who is responsible for the education of young people, who is responsible for, you know, building that kind of identity for people as they journey into the world and say, here I am, what is there for me to do, that they see for themselves a way to change the world they live in.
Sure.
And I think that's the study of government. That's the study
Right.
of history. That's the study of social studies.
And
that's our civics.
Yeah, and I think the last 7 weeks have proved science and medicine and government. That's in your face every single day. You know, looking at science, medicine, and government, and your civil rights and civil liberties. They have been there, and I saw the Senate's going back in this week. So
don't hold the House back. Mark, figure out that vote by proxy. Figure out whatever you need to do, but we need to get to work on how to figure out the future.
Exactly.
Because whatever the future looks like, you know, this country needs good leadership. This country needs good people that think about not only themselves, but the children and their grandchildren and those grandchildren's hopeful grandchildren. So, you know, from us here at the Donut Shop, that's pretty much all I really had planned, unless you had anything you wanted to bring up here towards the end, anything you wanted to pass along, things for the future.
No, I just, you know, congratulations to the class of 2020. If any of you are going to watch this, I miss you, and, you know, hopefully we'll get through some humps and figure out what's the best way to move forward for next year. So that's it. Thanks for having me.
We'll find a way to reintroduce everybody to the community that Angie's been building here for the last 27 years, along with her family and the rest of you Hilliard residents and surrounding community members. So thank you again for coming on.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Hopefully it wasn't too painful. If we find a way to do it again, or maybe I tap you for another resource, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's cool. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.